I think we have our candidates. Okay, is everyone able to hear me? You could just all nod. Okay, great. All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Lebanon and Lebanon School District Candidate Night. I'm Tracy Hutchins, and I will be your moderator with the Upper Valley Business Alliance. Just some housekeeping for you, a reminder that Monday, March 7th is the last day for absentee ballots to be returned in person to City Hall. And of course, on Tuesday, March 8th, that will be Election Day, and the polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Your polling locations for Ward 1 are the Kilton Public Library, Ward 2, the United Methodist Church at 18 School Street, and Ward 3 is City Council Chambers at City Hall. Tonight's event will be recorded and will be available on the City of Lebanon's website and aired on CATV or streamed online after the event. Every year we alternate between who will go first, the city council candidates or the school district candidates. And this year it is our city council candidates that will go first. A note about the format for this evening. When we start the session, each candidate will have 2 minutes to do an opening introduction. I will call on each of you, and then at the end of 2 minutes, I will say time or thank you. Ask you all to be cognizant of the time. And right after that, we will jump into questions and answers after the introductions. I'll ask everyone in the audience, if you have a question, to put it in the chat, and I will call on the candidate to answer it, a specific candidate if it's for a specific candidate, or just a candidate to answer, and then I will also allow the other candidates to weigh in. About 10 minutes before the hour, we will end the Q&A. We will have each candidate say a 1-minute final wrap-up, and then we will go right into our session with the SAU candidates at 7 p.m. So we can get going. Okay. Tim, I see you, and I think you were one of the first ones on. So if you would like to go first, please introduce yourself and say some opening remarks.
Sure. Thanks, Tracy. And thanks for doing this, by the way. So I'm Tim Mcnamara. I initially served on the council in the mid-90s and ran again in 2015. And I've been on the council since then, so I'm just finishing up my 7th year this time around. I've been serving as mayor since 2019, and I served as assistant mayor for 2 years before that. My priorities for the city are to ensure that Lebanon remains as an economically and environmentally sustainable community while maintaining an excellent quality of life for our residents. And I will say that there is no small share of challenges in doing this. And accomplishing this goal really means making strategic decisions and intelligent investments in the city's future while being continually cognizant of the impact on our taxpayers, and particularly our residential taxpayers. Certainly aware that taxes have continued to increase over the last several years. We try to hold those increases down whenever possible. We are very, very cognizant of our budgets every year, and it's always an interesting task to weigh those investments that we have to make as a city while maintaining the tax rates as reasonable. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Tim. Chris Simon, would you like to do your opening remarks, please?
Sure, Tracy, thank you. And I would also like to thank the Upper Valley Business Alliance for hosting tonight's event. And certainly I have a tough opening act to follow with Mayor McNamara, but I'm just going to briefly introduce myself to those who don't know me. My name is Chris Simon, and I'm running for Ward 1 representing West Lebanon for the Lebanon City Council. I moved to Lebanon in 1990 in the fall after joining the Lebanon Fire Department as a firefighter EMT for the next 30 years. During my time there, I progressed through the ranks, holding the position of lieutenant and then ultimately shift captain, to which I retired from in July of 2020. Excuse me. I'm also the past president of the Lebanon Professional Firefighters Association, Local 3197, and in the late 1990s worked with a joint labor management coalition to bring ambulance services under the direction and operation of the Lebanon Fire Department, a move that I feel has proven to be beneficial to the taxpayers of Lebanon. Now that I'm retired from the fire service, I want to continue serving my community that I have cared for the last 30 plus years by serving on the city council. I have learned many of the ins and outs of the city and would like to put that to use serving our residents and our taxpayers. Thanks to the hard work of the West Lebanon Revitalization Committee, we have a plan moving forward for West Lebanon. And as a city councilor, I will advocate for the funding and the means to bring that plan to fruition. Excuse me. Many of the ideas are really not that expensive and could easily be put into place and quickly accomplished. Others are going to take coalitions needing to be built between residents, the business community, and our city government to see it come through. And I feel that I have experience with those coalitions. A positive development for my neighbors here in West Lebanon was the recent demolition and removal of the Westboro Yard buildings. After much time, it is a welcome sight to see them gone. And I just want to tell everyone that I will work hard and do the best job that I possibly can for the citizens of West Lebanon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. And George Sykes, are you going to give us a statement this evening? Oh, I guess Mr. Sykes is not with us this evening. Okay. Well, then, Chris and Tim, you are the only two candidates participating tonight. So we will jump right in. And apparently the chat is not working. So I'll start with a few questions, and then if anyone has questions for the candidates, perhaps you can just raise your hand with the icon there.
Well, I was just going to say, Tracy, maybe we should let folks know that Tim and I are not directly competing head to head, where I'm running for the Ward 1 seat and he is running for the at-large seat.
That's right. Yes. Thank you, Chris, for reminding me of that. Exactly. Okay. So let's start with some questions. Chris, I will start with you. What do you think should be the top 3 priorities for the city, and what should the city council address if you're elected?
Well, certainly the number one priority is always going to be our city services. That's the backbone of the city. That's what makes us tick. Couple that in with maintaining that infrastructure. They kind of go side by side, but they are definitely somewhat independent and autonomous of each other. Certainly always, taxes. We all pay taxes. City councilors, just like our residents, we're taxpayers as well. So needing to be mindful of that, you have to always keep your wants and needs in line, and remember, excuse me, remember that. Certainly a third thing that I would like to see is that revitalization plan being moved forward in West Lebanon. We certainly have the ability to do that. I think some of the things very easily. There's some other things that may be a little bit more complicated. Just as a quick example, the Seminary Hill School. Certainly I would like to see that more utilized than it has been past recently. And maybe we could even bring a farmer's market to someplace in West Lebanon. So those are 3 priorities that I see at this time.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. And candidate Mcnamara, what do you think your 3 top priorities would be?
Probably very similar, but a little bit different. So I think my number one priority, because it has impacts in so many different areas, is maintaining the economic viability of this area. By having a healthy economy, we don't not only provide stable incomes for the folks that live here, but we are able to use that revenue to help offset property taxes. So it's important that we keep our local businesses healthy, that we promote them whenever possible, and that we have a vibrant economy. We really are very fortunate in the state right now, and I have conversations frequently with other mayors who are amazed that a city of our size has the diversity of businesses and manufacturing firms and research firms that we have here. And I think we're very fortunate to do that. We just have to stay on our toes with that. And that relates back to property taxes, as I mentioned. I think we always have to be sensitive to the fact that we want to maintain a diversity of people here in the city, and we don't want taxes to inadvertently exclude any group from that diversity. So it's important that we have younger people, older people, everyone. That's just a part of a healthy community. And an important part of that I think everyone's aware of now is the housing shortage. This is a regional issue. Lebanon can't address it on its own. I say this whenever I get the chance, that it has to be a regional solution to a regional problem. However, within the city of Lebanon, what we've seen in the last several years is an almost explosive growth in basically one type of housing unit, and that's rental apartments. We have seen well over 1,000 units either recently constructed, under construction, or approved. And that's going to have a significant impact on the demographics of the city, because it will result in population growth, the likes of which we have not seen in the 200-year history of the city. So we have to be ready for that. But in emphasizing that one housing type, and I understand why the market does that, that's where the profits are, we're ignoring what we call the missing middle, which means simply, if a young person moves to Lebanon and takes a job and progresses in that job and does a good job, but then wants to have a family, purchase a home, and stay here, there are very, very limited opportunities to do that. And so as a council, we are going to try to do whatever we can reasonably do to help promote an increase in the variety of housing unit types that are available, so that those young people who are moving in, who we desperately need over time, have the opportunity to stay here, and we don't lose them in a brain drain to some other part of the country. So I think housing is certainly one of the critical 3 things. We can't hear you, Tracy.
Sorry. You touched on a lot of issues, and I'm going to have you go first, Tim, with this question. Should the city consider having a tax cap?
You know, I think a tax cap is a good idea when you sort of first think about it out of context, but I think it's an impractical thing. I think that it limits you, it limits your flexibility to respond to things. So while it may seem attractive at first to people, I think they're better off sort of relying on the council to make good decisions with respect to their tax dollars, rather than having an artificial tax cap.
And Chris, what do you think about that? What are your feelings about a tax cap?
I certainly would not support a tax cap, simply because, just like Mayor Mcnamara said, it really can tie the council's hands to responding to any sort of need that may arise or come up within a community at any given time. Again, like the mayor said, they look very attractive. They're well packaged, sound kind of snazzy on the front end, and then you see the problems that come into it if you run into a sudden or more urgent need. At least that's my understanding with how they work. So I certainly echo the mayor's response as well.
Great, thank you very much. And let's talk about the housing. And housing, we all know it's very well known that we do have a housing shortage, certainly in the Upper Valley, really in all of the state of New Hampshire as well. So what role should the city play in the development of housing? And where do you see that going? Chris, let's go with you for this.
Sure. Well, as Mayor McNamara, again, I'm going to refer back to some of his comments in his opening. The housing is a major issue in not only, here in the city of Lebanon and the state of New Hampshire, in the entire country. Fortunately, we're not tasked with solving all the problems for the entire country, but I think that I've heard it once called trickle-down housing. That
Somebody is talking.
So somebody moves along, moves to a new residence, and somebody else moves up, and so on and so forth, and that hasn't been working for us. So we need to do housing is a priority. We need to have housing. We need to, like the mayor said, we don't want to create a brain drain of our youth and our talent. But we can't continue to sustain being the only place that apartments or cluster housing is being built here in Lebanon. We've got to start to take into account our natural resources that serve the Lebanon community. Can we continue to expand them or stretch them? The climate, that's a whole nother subject, but we need to start to take that into consideration. So can we continue to have the massive building that we've had? At the same time, balancing that with reasonable growth so that people who want to work here and live here, play here, stay here can reasonably afford to do so and have the ability to do. Not an easy task. I'm going to say right now, I'm probably not going to solve it in the first term that I serve.
Thank you, Chris. And Tim, what are your thoughts? What should be the city's role in the development of housing?
Yeah, great question. So I am not a big fan of municipal subsidies to create housing. I think that we have to target specific housing types that the market is not delivering right now. So I have really no interest in doing anything that further promotes the construction of large apartment complexes. They're being built now. I would argue maybe too many of them. But I think what we really need to think about is how do we incentivize single family detached housing? How do we incentivize smaller scale townhouse or apartment projects? And I think we can largely do that through the zoning. So our zoning now is, in my opinion, somewhat antiquated. There are other zoning ordinances throughout the country that are considerably more progressive with regards to things like cluster communities. And by cluster communities, I mean, groups of 6 to 12 or so smaller, more affordable single family homes on smaller lots. My children are scattered throughout the country, and my son, most recently, because he's in the service, lived in a home in suburban Maryland. It was a very nice home, not particularly large, but well designed, and on probably a 3,000 square foot lot. We don't allow those in Lebanon right now, but there are a lot of cases in the country where, with good architectural design and good land planning design, you can create these opportunities. So I'm currently working, with the city staff, including the planning office, on different ways that we might do infill projects. And when I say we, I mean the market, where the market might do infill projects that would be possible through changes to the zoning ordinance. And I think we really want to try to focus on keeping that type of development in existing developed areas where possible. We've recently identified about 70 or 80 undeveloped or lightly developed parcels within the city of 1 to 2 acres that are within the area currently served by water and sewer that could be potentially amenable for this type of development. And so I think that's where the city really has a role, is in helping to incentivize those areas for development where the market, as it is currently, of large developers really doesn't want to go. They don't find it profitable. But local developers, several of them have expressed interest to me. And boy, if you could make these modifications to zoning, I would love to do a small project here or there. So I think it's filling in those gaps, helping to fill in those gaps without subsidizing this through taxpayer funding. And frankly, a lot of that is education. We need to get out there and show existing neighborhoods that this type of development is not a detriment to their neighborhood, but rather it can be an asset to their neighborhood. And I've visited these types of communities in Washington State, in Colorado, as part of my job at the college, and I can tell you they are an asset to neighborhoods. So that's where I'm putting my focus right now.
Great, thank you very much. And I see that Mr. Sykes has joined us. George, do you want to weigh in? The question is, what role should the city play in the development of housing? And what would that be?
Yeah, I guess I could weigh in. I'm sorry I'm so late. I could not seem to get the link to work for me, and then I finally managed to get through it. So my apologies to everyone who's out there is listening and the organizers. My point is about this is that we're having a lot of development in the city, particularly in housing. And the problem with what's going on now is that's what the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority calls the missing middle. And that's where we are. We're having plenty of high-end housing with high costs and making it difficult. We're missing workforce housing. And I do believe that the city has to take an active role in this because the health of the city's economic health and social health, and just what we see ourselves as being community-wise is important that we have workforce housing. So how that role can take place is some of the things that we are actively engaged in now. Those would include zoning changes, which we're doing. It also could take advantage of some city assets that might help us look at a further more active role. So there's lots that can be done, and we should take an active role. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now,
a little kid.
Candidate Simon, in your remarks concerning housing, you mentioned that you felt that perhaps Lebanon is taking on too much of the burden for the region in terms of housing, and maybe some of the other communities in the region should take more responsibility as well. That's very difficult, of course, with local control to ask other communities to do that. Where do you find that the City Council of Lebanon might work with other communities, or how would you approach that issue of trying to make this more of a regional issue and not so much?
Yeah, your very end of your question, Tracy, you cut out, and I also have been told that my camera isn't working, so I apologize. It was my intent to share my picture, but apparently I have some shortcomings as well with the electronic devices tonight. Can you just say that last part of your question again, please?
Sure. I was saying that how as a city councilor would for Lebanon, would you work with other communities or try to be a leader in terms of having other communities in the region take on more of the housing issue rather than it all being centered in Lebanon?
Okay. Well, I certainly, as both the mayor and Councilor Sykes have said, zoning is a first good start. It's a way to certainly, some of these developers want to build their more profitable projects. It gives you the ability to start to shift some of that burden outside. I guess let me back up just a little bit and just say that you got to start off by trying to build partnerships with your neighboring communities. I think that's been done in the past, at least certainly the dialogue is open, and you need to try to work with the communities around you to better the housing situations that we have. And I would certainly try to build a partnership with my neighboring communities. I think if we make some of these zoning changes, which have been discussed, that will start to shift some of these other projects outside of the city.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Councilor Mcnamara, what do you think?
So this has been a topic that's been of interest to me for some time. And we frequently have this discussion in our monthly mayoral discussions. Lebanon is not alone. This same phenomenon is happening in Keene. It's happening in Concord. It's happening in a number of the other cities in New Hampshire. We have the services typically. We have the utility infrastructure. And so it has seemed like development has flowed towards us. What the other mayors and I feel is that we just have to keep pressing the issue with these other communities. And part of it, quite frankly, is education. So smaller communities, say communities under 4,000 people, tend to be afraid of that they're going to get large projects that are going to inundate them in one fell swoop. That is not the case. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case. So I am working with a couple of other mayors, specifically the mayor of Keene, to talk about educational programs where we can reach out to the select boards of these smaller communities and say, look, we're not asking you to accept a 500 unit project. We're asking you to make your zoning amenable, if it's not already, to a 15 unit project or a 20 unit project or a 30 unit project. And then to also reach out to the regional planning agencies and have them be our partners in this as well. Ultimately, we can't shame other towns into this. They're either going to do it or they're not. But what we're going to try to do is to work with them to show them that there is an upside to this, that there is an upside to having a balance of housing on a regional level and not shoving it all in one community or another. So, again, you have to use more of a carrot than a stick because we really don't have much of a stick to work with. I don't see us, modifying our zoning to literally try to shut everything out and create a moratorium. I just don't think that's feasible. But we do need to have zoning which encourages intelligent, balanced housing development. And then we need an outreach program for our neighbors to say, look, folks, the facts are the facts. You simply are either not accepting housing at the rate you need to, or you're excluding housing. And at some point, that is going to impact you economically. So, if those communities lose the ability to attract and retain younger people, they're going to ultimately have issues with their schools. They're not going to have enough kids in their schools, but they're going to have to maintain the facility with fewer people. And there is a downside to this. I'm just not sure all of them recognize that at this point.
Thank you. And Councilor Sykes, what are your thoughts? Oh, you're muted.
There we go. How's that?
There you
All
go.
right. So Thanks for calling on me again. So I would like to share one of the small things that I'm doing that's in relationship to this issue. So recently I had a meeting with some of the other state representatives nearby town. And we are talking about setting up initially a small group, social group for state legislators to meet with the intention that once we've had that opportunity in a social, non-threatening way, to then bring up the subject of housing and a regional approach. So that's going to be, that doesn't happen overnight, but it goes along with what Mayor Mcnamara is talking about, where we have to find opportunities to educate our neighboring towns on what kind of role they may take. And this wouldn't necessarily just be limited to New Hampshire side of the Upper Valley, but may involve state representatives from Vermont as well. We have some wonderful examples of bi-state regional efforts, the school district in Hanover and Norwich as an example. There are some others as well. And so these models can be used to work towards a better regional approach. But it all begins with sharing how you feel about things and where we think we should be going, and bring the issue to the forefront for, I guess, what I might call what Malcolm Gladwell calls the influencers in a community, so that the conversation becomes wider. And that's an important piece that needs to be done.
Great. Thank you very much, Counselor. Well, along with housing, of course, one of the reasons that so many people want to live in Lebanon is because we're fortunate enough to have public transportation. And public transportation is very important to our businesses, both large and small, in Lebanon and the region. However, and we're fortunate to have advanced transit serve as our public transportation. However, one of the issues that many of our businesses see is that advanced transit doesn't run past 6 p.m. So if you're somebody who works at a restaurant or perhaps third shift, or a later shift in a retail store, you're not able to use advanced transit to go to and from work. So what, as the city, can we do to address that situation? And also, if we do have more housing that gets moved outside of Lebanon, advanced transit does go outside of Lebanon. However, it becomes more difficult to have that robust public transportation. So, Councillor Mcnamara, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Sure. This is a real thorny issue that I have been dealing with for 20 years in my regular job. AT is a great place to start. It's a great organization. They're wonderful fundraisers. They get a significant amount of their funding from the state of Vermont. They get very little, if anything, from the state of New Hampshire. They're deeply subsidized by local communities, including Lebanon and the college. I have a hard time thinking about increasing Lebanon's subsidy significantly to advanced transit. However, I am aware that they have some serious limitations in that they don't run past typically 7 o'clock at night, and they don't run on weekends, and that is a very big issue for a large part of or significant part of our working population. I'm hopeful that through lobbying and the assistance of legislators such as Councilor Sykes, who's also a state rep, that we can get the state of New Hampshire to take a more active role in funding regional transportation agencies such as advanced transit, and not put it all on the local entities. People from Enfield and Canaan also would work on 12A and would take AT if there was bus service out there that matched their needs. So I'd like to see more local representation from or more support from the outlying communities that would hopefully help AT to increase their schedule. And I also think that more subsidy from the state of New Hampshire is going to be absolutely necessary to do this, and perhaps federal subsidy as well. Again, like housing, and perhaps even more so, this is a regional issue and has to be addressed on a regional and a statewide basis.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sykes, what are your thoughts about the transportation needs of our region?
So for you may not know this, the public listening may not know this, but I am the ranking member of the Transportation Committee in the House, New Hampshire House, and have been at one time or another the chair of that committee as well. I've in the past introduced legislation to help establish a bus service between Claremont and Lebanon. It didn't go great, but it seems to be, it is now happening. I agree with Mayor Mcnamara that the amount of money that the state puts in to
get on
public transit is just paltry by comparison with Vermont. And we need to change the dynamic and how that works. I think that can be accomplished in several ways, and the city can take a reasonably active role in that as well. One tool clearly is to be involved with the regional planning commissions and make sure that they are have transportation, which is so integral and connected with housing as an issue. Make sure that they're actively engaged in working to make sure that we're looking, not overturning every single stone that there might be in order to find the resources to expand bus service, not just at night either, but on weekends too. I mean, there's a lot of people who work weekend jobs who would take advantage of the increased service for advanced transit. And then on top of that as well, the Hampshire Municipal Association often weighs in on these types of issues, and I think it would be important for the city's representatives, city council representative to the New Hampshire Municipal Association to be, again, weighing in on the issue of how important transportation is. And the mayor touched on something that is equally important about this. One of the reasons why advanced transit is so successful, at least within the scope of the services that they provide now, is that they are affordable, available, and convenient. And when you keep those three factors in play, then ridership goes up, and people are more willing to take advanced transit. And we finally should recognize that for young professional people who may be interested in moving into much of the housing that is occurring, a lot of it here in Lebanon, many of them, they don't want to own a home necessarily. They do want to have a nice apartment. They do want to have access to amenities, which is something I hope we'll get to talk about later. And finally, they don't always want to own a car, and they wouldn't, and it helps with our services the city has to provide if they don't have a car. And the key to that is good public transportation, reliable, available, convenient, affordable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sykes. And candidate Simon, what are your thoughts on public transportation in Lebanon?
Well, they certainly have covered a lot of the bases that I would cover. I would also like to say that it promotes good climate, more vehicles that we can have off the road on a regular basis. That's better for our environment, which I feel very strongly about. And it also helps lessen the wear and tear on our roadways, which is our infrastructure, which is important, which costs a lot of money to maintain. Certainly, Councillor Sykes, Representative Sykes, has done a lot of good work in his position on the Transportation Committee for the state of New Hampshire. and I feel pretty good that he's down there lobbying very hard for us. We need to partnerships with other communities, just like Mayor Mcnamara has said. And I was trying to say that in my comments about zoning, but it didn't quite come out as well as I had hoped. So certainly would want to partner there as well. But regionally, we definitely need to have partners on this busing issue. Certainly want to hope that we can find the funding so that we can start to see the service expanded on later in the evening and certainly on weekends. Anyone that's traveled recently to the 12A area knows that certainly there's a lot less of employees seem to be available. So if we can do anything to help get more people back to work, I think that's very important as well. And lastly, on the bus, I would say that it's not a unique issue just to us here in the Lebanon area. I know that there's certainly 3 or 4 small bus companies in Vermont, and sure there is throughout the state of New Hampshire. So, it's probably been asked, but maybe it should be re-asked. What did they do to help deal with some of these problems that they have dealt with? And certainly maybe they were successful, or maybe we can learn from their mistakes. So reaching out to our regional partners.
Thank you. Now, candidate Simon, you've mentioned infrastructure a couple of different times here tonight. The city has done quite a bit in terms of rebuilding or refurbishing infrastructure of late, water and sewer. Where do you think the city needs improvements in terms of infrastructure? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we've certainly, when I bring it up, I'm speaking from, we need to maintain it. The infrastructure is vital to our business community, is what brings our workforce in, is what brings the goods and services in that our taxpayers and citizens and community members utilize. We want to, we don't want to let things get behind. Certainly, I can think of several projects, one of them being the South Main Street Dry Bridge, right at the South Main Street, just off the intersection. Certainly has been long overdue for replacement, and I understand that it's on the state list and there's complicating factors that go with that, but that's certainly something that should be dealt with sooner than later now, certainly with the federal money that has been deemed strictly for infrastructure. And I'm sure it probably is on the schedule somewhere. So we want to maintain those. Like I said, we want to maintain our roadways. We want to maintain our waterways. And it's vital to continuing to have a strong community and keep us moving forward.
Great, thank you. And Councillor Mcnamara, what are your thoughts on infrastructure? You've been pretty involved with this during your time on the City Council. Where do we need to continue to improve, or what needs to be top of the list?
So part of this, we have to go back to the realization that this is a limitation on resources. Some 20 years ago, we entered into a consent decree with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to deal with our combined sewer overflows, where we had stormwater and sewer and sanitary sewer lines commingled, which were resulting in discharges of untreated sewage during periods of high precipitation. We had the opportunity way back then to take advantage of federal dollars to address this problem. And the council at the time decided that they were not going to go along with this, that they could fight the federal government and win. And surprise, they lost. And by the time we entered into consent decree with the US EPA, those federal dollars had dried up. So as a result of that, I would argue, bad decision, the city was forced to spend in excess of $70 million to comply with the consent decree and separate our sewers. At the time we did that, in many cases, we were tearing up roads significantly, and rather than simply put a sewer line in and patch the road, we would do things like put in a sidewalk, replace aging water lines, replace aging stormwater lines. So we were only digging that road up once. And I think that was a good investment. We're going to be paying off the bond on the CSO project, which is finally finished, for a very long time. And that's going to limit the resources that we have to do other infrastructure projects. So we have to be very selective. And let me just take a second and talk about roads. People always complain about roads. I don't blame them. I complain about them myself. We've done an evaluation of every square inch of roadway in the city. We have prioritized where roads need to be repaired. And we've got probably a half a century or more of road repairs that need to be done. And we're trying to prioritize those, but they're not going to get done. They're not going to get done quickly. In some cases, we're highly dependent on the state. Bridge projects, for example, are typically 80-20 projects. And that's the reason that the dry bridge has not been fixed yet, is we are still negotiating with the state on exactly what that project should be and what portion of it they will cover, which should be 80%. We don't want to enter into those projects on our own when there could be state funds, and there are state funds, to help pay for them. So if I look at priorities, I look at trying to intelligently look at road reconstruction where it needs to happen. At some point in time, we have to look at a secondary water source. We have one primary water source, that's Mascoma Lake. If we were to have a problem, an oil spill, for example, upstream of our treatment plant, and we had to shut that treatment plant down for a while, we really have no option but to turn on some emergency valves between us in Hanover and us in Hartford, and that's really not a long-term solution. So at some point in time, we do think about a secondary water supply. We have identified well locations in the vicinity of 12A, but we would need to make the investment in those wells to be able to bring that online. So those, I think, sewer is in pretty good shape right now. Water scares me a bit, and I think we're going to have to make some investments at some point in time. And roadways, we just have to tackle them as funds are available.
Thank you. Councillor Sykes, would you like to weigh in on infrastructure in the city? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Most of the points that I would have made have been made already, but I would like to put a little bit of a different twist on this. And by that, I mean, what is the best investment for the city in terms of infrastructure? To my mind, it's infrastructure that we don't build because we don't have to. Basically, it's conservation. It's sort of like energy. The cheapest energy you can buy is the energy that you save and don't use any. So through our zoning efforts, one of the important points that I would make, and this point has been made by many different studies, that if you can build where your existing infrastructure exists, you do not create additional miles of infrastructure that need to be maintained in the future. And that saves the taxpayers and the city a lot of money. So that is one way we could deal with our infrastructure issues, is to make sure that if development is to occur, we try to do it within the confines of infrastructure that already exists. The return on your tax dollars is much greater. So if you spend a lot of money, and yes, you get some tax revenues coming in, but then you're sending money back out to do repairs, it's not as good as you get the development, you get the tax dollars back, and you're not spending any additional dollars for maintenance other than what you might have otherwise.
Thank you. Well, we have just a couple of minutes before we start to wrap up. Councillor Sykes, you had brought up amenities in the city, and that has been a hot topic over the last year in Lebanon with the tunnel opening, the Mascoma Greenway, downtown revitalization. So tell us, what amenities are still needed by the city? What needs improvement? And give us a sense of why this is so important, and important that taxpayers should want to invest in that.
Thank you. So clearly, one of the big reasons why people move into a community, one of the big reasons why people, more importantly, stay in a community, is that their access to the types of amenities that they hope to have. And we are blessed in many regards here in the city. And you've mentioned some of them. At Mcnamara Valley the Greenway, it's near my house. I use it virtually every day. It's a wonderful resource. And it came about because of dedicated hard work of volunteers and the recreation department and so on. And so that's wonderful. And we have a lot of trails throughout the city. One thing we are doing as a city council, just last night, we set a bunch of public hearings to change some old class 6 unused roads into trails. And if we can, and that will make more trails available. One of the areas where we're a little bit deficient is we do not have enough public playing fields. And we do not have particularly enough playing fields or small parks in the areas where the city's experiencing residential growth. And I know that the city is taking effort, and by that I mean, for instance, up on Mount Support Road, up on Route 10. There's a lot of housing that's gone in there, but there's no parks and there's no other access to trails, but there's no small parks. Places where kids can kick a ball around and so on. Now we are taking steps to make that better. The city's actively engaged to improve that, but that's one particular. In West Lebanon also, we took a big step recently with the demolition of the old railroad yard, and who knows how that'll all play out eventually. The city is attempting to lease the land and then make it available for other uses like recreation. We're trying through partnerships with private developers to connect some of the trails that we have throughout West Lebanon. It's going to take a long time, but we can do it, and that's where we should be. We should be investing in our future by making recreational opportunities available. There you are.
Thank you very much. Candidate Simon, what are your thoughts on amenities?
Well, certainly we have a lot of good trails, that, as Councilor Sykes has already mentioned. Those are those amenities that do attract a lot of folks to live here. It promotes healthy lifestyles, and we certainly want to just continue to support that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And Councilor Mcnamara, what are your thoughts?
So I agree. The Greenway has been a tremendous public-private partnership funded largely with private donations. That's the type of project I'd like to see, where it's not all city investment, but there's a public investment as well. The Greenway is tremendously popular. We had some controversy when we decided to redo the tunnel rather than fill it in, and we spent several $100,000 extra, but I'm absolutely convinced that it was one of the best investments that we've ever made. To connect the Greenway with the rail trail is tremendous. I think we need to make more use of our waterfront areas. West Lebanon, now that we have the rail yard down, has a tremendous exposure to the Connecticut River. The city actually owns a 2-acre parcel adjacent to the bridge going into White River. That could be a wonderful waterfront park. We have for years almost completely ignored the Mascoma River as it goes through town. The city of Franklin has made significant investments in their waterfront to create Whitewater Park, for example. That's something we might consider, and I know there's a lot of private interest in that. We have so many resources already, like Storrs Hill. How many towns or cities have a ski hill in the middle of their town with lighting, with snowmaking, and with a nice base area? I learned to ski there. It's a tremendous resource, and it's a public-private partnership between the outing club and the city. So I think between really giving attention to our natural features, whether it's our woodland trails, whether it's the rail trail, the Greenway, places like Storrs Hill, or the Mascoma and Connecticut rivers, we need to try to leverage public-private partnerships to make those facilities and resources available to everyone and really promote them as a quality of life issue, because it definitely is.
Thank you. I see we have a question. Joshua, I invite you to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. And gentlemen, appreciate your time. Appreciate you taking the opportunity to speak in front of everybody. I've heard a lot about upgrades and updates and things that we can do to better Lebanon. But with that said, the elephant in the room is that we're facing rapid inflation with 7.5% in 2021. I haven't heard a whole lot about how we can save money. And that's a pressing issue when $100 a year ago is worth 92 today. How do you plan to be more fiscally responsible now that a lot of these major projects have come to completion and find ways to save city taxpayers money?
Councillor Mcnamara?
Yeah, so Josh, I'll give you one example, and that's the landfill gas to energy project at the landfill. So right now, and for years now, we have been flaring the methane gas from that landfill. Within the next year, we'll be taking that methane gas. We've made an investment in infrastructure to turn that gas into energy. We'll be generating about 1 megawatt a year, and that will offset all of the city's municipal electrical energy expenses. And that has a great payback. And electricity is certainly not going to get any cheaper over time. It's going to get more expensive. So every kilowatt we can offset through what is essentially free gas at the landfill, we are benefiting the city. So that's one way that we can leverage the resources we have to reduce overall costs.
Mr. McNamara, I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt. In relation to that project in particular, as a taxpayer, I'm curious to know what the ROI is on that.
I don't have it right. I don't have it right here, Josh. I don't have the ROI on that right here. We can get it for you.
Understood. Thank you. Just curious.
Yeah, I was just going to say it has been calculated in the
Yes.
city's planning.
Yep. So the other, they want to add other areas, where.
Councillor Sykes or candidate Simon, would either of you want to weigh in on potential ways that the city could save some money? I would,
rather than get to specifics, I'd like to talk about what has actually been done. So one of the things that I appreciate is Josh is concerned about, what we're doing to cut back on costs and so on. And actually, we've made some incremental steps for the first time in a long time. I'll call out 2 examples. So one is I happen to be the chairman of the Grafton County delegation, and we approved the Grafton County's budget. And last year there was a decrease. The budget went, the percent of taxes, the money to be raised by taxes actually went down. That's the first time that's happened in many, many years. And the same thing happened in the city. So we are minding our pennies, because when we find the pennies, they add up pretty quickly. We can do more, and we will do more. And again, the landfill gas to energy was a good example of a return on investment. Another example of how the city is trying to pay attention to the bottom line is the landfill itself. When I was first on the council back in 2010, 2009, 8 and 9, there was a fear that the landfill was going to run out of room in a very, relatively short amount of time. Well, through prudent management and investments, the landfill's usable life now has expanded dramatically. I don't know the exact number of years, but it's decades now. And that will save taxpayers a lot of money in the long run, because other communities are paying incredibly outrageous tipping fees in order to get their trash to landfills elsewhere in New Hampshire, for example, not necessarily here locally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're running a little bit of overtime, so I think we will do our wrap up right now. Candidate Simon, would you like to do your 1 minute wrap up, please?
Sure, thank you. Again, thank you for hosting this evening. And again, I just want to apologize to everyone who's tuned in. I'm having some technical difficulty with my camera, as I've been told it is not working. I just want to reiterate that I'm asking the Ward 1 residents of West Lebanon to vote for me for their next city councilor. I've lived here in the city for over 30 years. I moved to West Lebanon side of the city in 2004, where I raised my daughter with my wife and build relationships with my friends and neighbors here and understand the differences that face both our sides of the community. Excuse me. And I'm a proud member of the West Lebanon community, and I want to put my time, energy, and thoughtfulness to work for all of you here in West Lebanon, and look forward to doing so if you see to elect me on Election Day, March 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Mcnamara, do your 1 minute, please.
Sure, not really much to add, except I'm feel very fortunate to have been given the opportunity to serve the city for the past 7 years, and I look forward to serving for the next 2, and we'll see where we go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mcnamara. And Councillor Sykes.
Yes, I begin by saying that I appreciate the support that I've received from the voters citywide in years past. I'm in my 5th term in the House, which is over 10 years. I've been in the City Council now for less than that, but look forward to continuing to work for the interests of the taxpayers and for the city. One of the things that I bring to the table in this regard, I believe, is my continued role in the New Hampshire legislature and being able to take city issues and bring them to Concord and bring Concord issues back to the city. I think that's a valuable thing to do. I've spent nearly 20 years in the Lebanon Fire Department, so I have a long history of trying to serve the people of the city, and I hope to continue to do so in the future, and would appreciate their support in Lebanon's Ward 2.
Very good. Thank you very much, Councillor Sykes. Well, that's going to conclude the City Council candidate portion of our evening. I want to thank Councillor Tim Mcnamara, Councillor George Sykes, and candidate Chris Simon, who is running for Ward 1. Now we will jump right into our candidates for the Lebanon School Board. And we have with us tonight Martha DiDomenico, who is running for an at-large seat. She's an incumbent. Jenica Nealon, who is also running for an at-large seat and is an incumbent. Mary Eads, who is running for the school board at-large seat and is a new candidate. And Renee Depaolo, who is running for the at-large seat and is also a new candidate. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Like we did with the city council candidates, we're going to start off with having a 2-minute introduction. And Martha, I will start with you. Please unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Thank you for hosting us tonight. I'd like to say that each school board member brings specific talents, skills, and expertise to contribute to the collaboration of accomplishing the work of the board for the benefit of the district and its students. My strengths are strong analytical skills, fiscal responsibility, and the ability to understand the big picture. I've embraced my role as a board member and always ensure that I'm thoroughly prepared for all board and committee meetings. If the topic being addressed is not straightforward, I seek clarification. There's a steep learning curve for new members as they familiarize themselves with continuing issues. If re-elected, I will be poised to make meaningful contributions to board discussions immediately, as I have intricate knowledge of previous plans and discussions. We have several major initiatives in progress that I have invested numerous hours of my time into that I would like to see come to fruition, such as the track renovation, the Mount Lebanon School renovation, the Hanover Street School and the Lebanon High School renovation, the equity audit, as well as the vetting of the next 3-year strategic plan and the future ownership and use of the SAU building. One of the main responsibilities of the board is to maintain open communication with the community and serve as an advocate for all students within the district. When we're asked to make major decisions that will have a significant impact on our families, I readily seek out feedback from families across all of our schools and listen to and read all of our public comments. I believe it is important to understand the impact of our decisions and consider multiple points of view. I am committed to making well-informed, fact-based decisions before casting my vote as a member. Finally, one of my goals during my initial term was to increase transparency between the board and the community. I believe that we have made great strides in this area, but there is still opportunity for improvement. Our transparency within the school community has vastly improved. However, it has become apparent to me when speaking to residents not connected to our schools that we need to do a better job communicating with all Lebanon residents, not just our school families. We need to develop a process to routinely communicate with the community at large, as well as promote on our website all the great learning opportunities in our schools, celebrate our students' academic and extracurricular accomplishments, and keep the taxpayers of Lebanon well informed of our projected long-term capital needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Renee, please unmute yourself and give us your introduction, please.
Hi, thank you. It's good to be back here again this year. I ran last year. For those of you who don't know, I'm Renee Depaolo. I am in Ward 2. I have a 10-year-old son that goes to the Lebanon School District. I'm running to make some hopeful changes. I know that the school board's been working on trying to get out in the community more and build some relations. And as a community member, I haven't seen a lot of that. In my daily job, I focus on educating community members and building relationships. And I think that I can bring a strong sense of community to the school board, as well as advocate for the needs of our kids. We hear a lot about the needs of our adults, and focusing on the parents and what their needs are, and not enough on the kids and what their needs are within the school, whether it be around teachers, testing, schooling practices. And I feel like that's part of what the school board is there to do, is to support our kids. I hear a lot about spending money to make things look beautiful. And while that's all good and grand, I don't hear enough about the mental health impacts that our kiddos are going through right now because of extensive mask wearing. I don't hear enough about kind of all of those social problems that we're having with our kids and getting back to some normalcy. So if I am elected on the school board, I would love to be able to advocate more for the community that doesn't have kids in the school, as well as the kids themselves, because they just don't have a voice and somebody needs to do that for them.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Jenica Nealon, would you like to unmute and tell us about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Tracy. It's just been a tremendous privilege for me to serve on the Lebanon School Board these past 3 years. When I first ran for the position, I had such a positive impression from my oldest kid's experience at Hanover Street School that my main goal going in was just to help ensure the quality of the education for all of our students. 3 years later, despite much of that time having been during the pandemic, I'm happy to say that I still feel the same way about our district. Our teachers, staff, administrators, and students are remarkable, and I'm grateful to be living in Lebanon. If I am re-elected to the board, my main priority is to get our schools back to a pre-pandemic environment. Even before the New Hampshire state guidelines regarding masks in schools changed last week, I advocated that our schools move to optional masks for students and staff, and that we begin to reintroduce activities such as field trips and parent volunteer activities in the school buildings. This will continue to be my focus over the next few months. We can't necessarily predict what will happen in the fall or winter with COVID, but we know that thankfully, kids are the lowest risk age group for COVID and can now be vaccinated, and our school policy should continue to reflect that. Other areas I'm interested in include working with administrators to ensure that students of all abilities are having their educational needs met. I also voted in favor of bringing forward the warrant article for a bond for desperately needed renovations to Hanover Street School and the high school. We have put these renovations off for years, and our facility needs and the prices associated with them will only continue to grow if we keep putting them off. 3 years on the board sounds like a long time, but there was so much to learn in my first term that I feel like I'm just hitting my stride. I believe I can be an even more effective board member if I am reelected to another term. Thank you for your consideration and for your vote.
Thank you, Jenica. Mary Eads, would you like to unmute, please, and give us your introduction? Oh, okay. I guess maybe, oh. Mary, are you with us? Okay, well, we'll just move along then, and perhaps when Mary, if she's having a technical difficulty. Like to remind anyone, if you have a question for our candidates, please use the little hand icon, raise your hand. The chat is apparently not available, but if you raise your hand, then I can see you and we'll be able to call on you. So, and we do have a question already. Susan Almy, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. I missed some of, just a little, it looks like, of the beginning of this because I'm in Concord overnight and.
Oh, Susan, I think you muted yourself.
I'm sorry if this came up at all in the first speech, which I missed part of because I'm trying to do this out of a motel. But we have, I'm in the state legislature, we have an enormous number of bills being fought seriously over in Concord, many of which have already impacted or will impact the school district. And I'd like to know if the board members, the people that are board members already, in particular, have been told about these, whether there is anything that Lebanon is doing to interject it in the conversation, because a lot of other school districts are trying to do that.
Do you have a specific example, Susan, for them?
Well, the first one would be the telling the teacher, all the teachers of this state, that they cannot talk about race, class, sexism, or I forget what the fourth one is, without being careful not to offend any child in the classroom by somehow getting them to think that they're guilty of something.
Oh, okay.
And there is a complaint line that's been set up by the Department of Education to receive complaints about this, and the teachers that offended and were seen to offend by the state school board, which is now being run, I think, by the same people, can take away the teaching credentials. And in a large parts of the state, we're hearing that teachers are trying desperately to figure out how to teach to these mandates, because it's a fairly vague one also about what you can do and what you can't.
Okay.
And I don't hear anything in Lebanon or the Upper Valley about what's been going on everywhere else in the state. So.
All right. Well, Martha, I'll call on you first, but I'll let everybody weigh in. Can you, as an incumbent candidate, let us know what the SAU has been doing about, I believe that this is the divisive concepts law. Can you comment on that for Susan?
Correct. That's the general name that's used, but they called it something else.
Okay. Go ahead, Martha.
I think over my term in the board, we have, or especially in this year, one of our initiatives is to have more outreach to our local state representatives, and to also have more representation about our feelings of current legislation with the New Hampshire School Board Association And at I think it was our last board meeting, we actually had Senator Prentice came in and gave us an overview of all of the current legislation that pertains to schools that is now being debated in Concord. But it's a board initiative to get more involved in state legislation, but right now we haven't necessarily been overly involved.
Okay, thank you. Jenica, as an incumbent school board member, do you want to comment on the divisive concepts law, and how do you see your role as a school board member? How do you think that this relates to your role as a school board member?
Yeah, I agree with much of what Martha said, is that we are becoming, I think, slowly more involved in sort of the state issues, with Sue coming to one of our previous meetings, and the members that we send every year, the delegates that we send to the New Hampshire State Board Association to help them vote to have issues to lobby onto the state. Personally, I'm opposed to the divisive concepts law. I think it's a kind of a bad law, and I don't like the idea of people calling in teachers for stuff they teach in the classroom. So I would like to see the board continue to advocate this and perhaps expand our advocacy on the state level. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Renee, if elected, this is something that you will be dealing with. Do you have some comments about this?
Yeah, so in my current position, I spend a lot of time working on bills within the legislative state Senate, and I'm actually baffled that the school board isn't more involved with this type of thing. It's important, and it directly affects our students and our teachers, and there are more than just this divisive concept bills that are in the legislature right now that are being voted on that are going to directly impact everyone. So I would definitely, as a board member, volunteer myself to be somebody that's paying attention to these bills, because it is important, and you can't make change if you're not knowledgeable of what's happening.
Great, thank you very much. And Mary Eads, did you join us, or are you available to comment on this? Okay, I guess not. I guess we have lost Mary. Dick Milius, I see that you have your hand raised. Please unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy, and thanks so much to you and the Business Alliance for hosting this tonight. Full disclosure, I'm currently a member of the school board, and my question concerns the renovation bond that's going to be on the ballot. During the city council portion of the meeting, we heard a fair amount about residential business development and residential development. We know there are a number of housing projects at various stages of approval going through the system to provide some badly needed housing. At the same time, we're looking at for what's about $18 million in renovations for our school buildings. Some of that is coming from our capital fund and ESSER funds, but as everyone knows, $14.3 million is coming from the bond issue proposed. And that's not going to add any new classrooms, any more seats for our kids. And so while I appreciate how much some of these improvements and amenities are needed, I'm just wondering if this passes, we're going to be still paying off the middle school bond, paying off another 20-year bond. What do the candidates think about the prospect of having an influx of kids in the next 3, 4, 5 years or more? And how are we going to deal with that? How are we going to pay for expanding our capacity when we're not doing it now?
Okay, Renee, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. So I chair the DEI Commission for Lebanon, and we actually just pulled numbers starting back in 2009 all the way through to 2022. Our population has not grown as much as we would love to say. Maybe our daytime population, which is people that don't live here, but as far as students and residents go, I believe we were at like 11,000 in 2029. 2022, our population is 13,600 or something. At this time, we are coming out of a pandemic and focusing on spending more money. So someone who has a $300,000 house is going to be spending over $15,000 or so in taxes. They're already paying off a bond. I'm just concerned that the more we're focusing on the whole instead of just correcting things that need to be fixed at this time, like ADA compliance, things that are really impacting our kiddos, that we are going to lose a lot of individuals in this community. We have a lot of elderly population, as everyone knows, in this area that are on fixed incomes. We have quite the high poverty rate here in this area. While I agree that there are aspects of our schools that need to be corrected, I also know that we need to be fiscally responsible for our community at this time, especially coming out of a pandemic.
Thank you very much. Jenica.
So I would say that even though we are getting more housing, I think it's difficult to predict that we will actually still see a significant upswing in students in our schools 3, 4, and 5 years from now. I would say that the renovation packages that we've brought to the voters the past few years have not passed. So we've worked on making these bonds smaller. And if we added on more for additional classrooms, that would make them bigger and I think even less likely to pass. So I would prefer to focus on what is right in front of us right now, the renovations that we have packaged in the last few years, reduced and consolidated a little bit, get those passed, and we'll see what the future brings in terms of more students.
Thank you very much. And Martha?
I agree with Jenica that we have really focused a lot on our renovations and redesigning to get the most efficient design possible, and to spend the taxpayers' money wisely while getting much needed improvements for, meet fire code requirements, our ADA needs and technology upgrades and needs, and get functional spaces, especially with regards to education spaces and the student nurses' offices. However, I too am concerned that there are no additional classrooms as part of this renovation, but I think that we can overcome that with by looking at possible going back and revisiting the school unification plans that we had a couple of years ago and dusted them off. We kind of started to do a little bit of this work, and then it was put aside. So I think that by renovating our schools, we will have adequate spaces that are functional and ADA accessible. And then I think there are other alternatives that we can look at, such as redistributing some of the students across different schools, especially in the elementary school system, to help us maintain a quality education and our student size class ratios without going back to the taxpayers for additional funds.
Okay, thank you very much. Cappy Nunlist, I see that you have your hand raised. Please unmute and ask your question. Hello, Cappy, are you with us?
I am there.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. My hand moved over the mic again. I was just saying thank you very much, all three of you, for understanding the importance of engaging with the legislature because so much of what you do is constrained by the laws they pass. Jenica, thank you for giving your position on the devices concepts law. And I would just like to ask both Martha and Renee what their personal position is on that, and also on the accounts for parents that are homeschooling and or sending their kids to private school. I'd like your opinion, because if you're going to advocate as a school board, I want to know which position you're taking when you do that advocacy.
Okay, Martha, would you like to field that first?
Sure. I do not support the divisive concepts legislation. As with Jenica, think that teachers should be able to teach and should not be penalized for teaching subjects. I do believe that teachers have a duty, though, to present unbiased both sides of the topic, so that students can make up their own minds for themselves, the things that they're being taught. I think we should provide an unbiased education to our students. With regards to the education assistant accounts, I think that they are meeting a need for students and providing underserved students with an opportunity to maybe thrive in a model environment that best meets their individual needs that aren't served by the current school that they're attending. However, I think with these educational accounts that the structure of the program is key, and that the devil is really in the details. The current program is limited to 300% of the federal poverty level, but I also think there needs to be a lot of accountability data analysis, tracking, and reporting and structure around the program, because these are taxpayer dollars ultimately that are being used to educate children, and we want to make sure that they are being educated to the best of their ability. And I am not in favor of these accounts being used for homeschooling, because I don't think there's enough accountability in New Hampshire, the way the homeschooling system is structured, to ensure that our students are being well educated.
Okay, and Renee, your opinion, please.
Yeah, I am also not in favor of the divisive concepts bill. While I think that everything should be unbiased and within moderation, and children should be able to make up their own minds, I do have some thoughts around, the younger population of kiddos, being taught specific things, but that's something that works through in the curriculum. So no, and a big part of that bill specifically states that, the state of New Hampshire is fundamentally racist and sexist, and that's hard for anyone to swallow and believe, historically or not. In terms of the educational account, I agree with Martha. There needs to be a lot of data, there needs to be structure and some accountability in place. And if it works for some kids, then that's okay. We need to, my son went to Montessori school his first 5 years, and I thought Montessori was fantastic because it teaches kids at different levels and a way for them to really hear things. And I think that no kid learns the exact same. So we just need to be able to be accommodating to the kids that need different.
Okay, and Mary Eads, have you joined us by phone? Would you like to unmute and weigh in as well? Okay, maybe not. All right, well, we'll just move ahead. The role of...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, never.
Okay.
Never mind.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
The role of a school board member is focused on policies and the budget. Over the last 2 years, this has also included responding to the COVID pandemic. Based on the information today, and of course we know it's still shifting sands a little bit, and the CDC has just recently released some new protocols, but what COVID protocols would you have in place today? And how do you see that playing out for the rest of the school year? Jenica, why don't we begin with you?
Sure. So I think it is definitely time to move to optional masking and give our students and staff the option to not wear a mask if they wish. So I think it'd be great for students to be able to express themselves clearly, especially our younger kids who maybe have speech therapy or need additional assistance with that. I'd also like to see just sort of a general relaxation of the protocols. So, no masks at recess, more intermingling of the classes, being able to eat lunch in the cafeteria again, instead of just at their desks. They're at their desks almost all day, even in the elementary schools. As I said in my opening statement, it's hard to know what's going to happen with COVID in the fall and the winter. We're definitely seeing to be on the downslope now. So the board, I think, should just sort of stay involved and stay just keep an eye out for all the data. But right now, I think we're definitely due for a relaxing of COVID procedures and protocols.
Great, thank you very much, Jenica. Renee, what are your thoughts on masking and COVID protocols?
Yeah, I agree. If not now, when? We're at a good place that our kiddos just need to see each other. There's really is something to be said, especially for those elementary level kids that they haven't seen people's faces. They haven't seen human interaction and human emotion. And they're in terms of emotional growth and mental health and well-being, as we know, growing up, that's a huge component of growth, is being able to read social cues and facial expressions and things of that nature, which they've lost out on for the last 2.5 years. I would also love to see masks off outside. It's not healthy to breathe in your own CO2 gases all day long. And these kiddos, I mean, I've seen an increase in migraines for my kid. And, so there's definitely some hindrance there. So yeah, I'm ready.
Very good. And Martha, what are your thoughts?
I agree with Jenica and Renee. I think that now is the time to start relaxing some of these protocols. The trend is going down. We're getting positive information from the state health department as well as from the CDC regarding masking and trends, and there's lack of transmission or clusters happening in schools. We have the opportunity for parents to vaccinate if they want to their children. We have the opportunity for staff to vaccinate if they want to. And we also are not saying that you can't wear a mask. I think that it's very important that we respect everybody's personal decision, but that we don't, that we start to relax the protocols and let people choose what is comfortable for them, what risk they were willing to tolerate with their family. In the meantime, bringing back some normalcy. I'd like to see, you know, a lot more of the activities brought back, like Jenica said, the field trips, you know, the school dances. I know I have a child that's in the middle school that historically they talk in their handbook about having a 7th and 8th grade dance, and my child has never had that. They, you know, have missed out on a lot of different traditions in their life, and I'd like to see the children get back some normalcy.
Very good. And Mary Eads, who's also a candidate, if you are on, if you dial *6 on your phone, you can also comment. Are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Excellent. Thank you, Mary. I'm glad you're with us now. Would you also like to comment on COVID protocols for the rest of the year?
I agree with the rest of them that the mask should be optional for staff and students. And along the way, I want to recognize
Okay, Mary, your connection is cutting out a little bit, and it's difficult for us to hear.
and so is my phone. I don't know why.
Okay, well, we'll go forth and we'll do the best that we can, and keep you engaged as well. All right, let's see. Let's go on to recently the Lebanon School Board approved a statement regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's also in the process of performing an equity audit. As a school board member, how will you ensure that our schools are safe and supportive places where our children can learn to be part of a healthy, engaged community and a sense of belonging? Martha, why don't we start with you on this one?
Sure. I think that our schools as a whole right now are a welcoming place, but as with everything, there's opportunity for improvement and we can do better. And I certainly would like an environment where everyone feels inclusive and true to be their authentic self. I think that the equity audit is a great first step in ensuring that, and that will be able to highlight hopefully any deficiencies that we may have in our school system so that we as a board can begin to really look at the results and address the areas that are needed. But I also am encouraged that with the equity audit, we're actually, you know, really coming at it from a holistic approach and looking at what is needed for the success of all our students, not just one particular group of students. I think we do a good job of supporting our special educational students, and we probably could do a little bit better supporting our regular education students by providing some more opportunities for enrichment, especially at the elementary level. But I think that there are going to be a lot of thoughtful discussions coming up, and I can't wait to participate in them.
Thank you, Martha. Renee, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, excuse me. So Lebanon City just adopted the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. As I said, I'm the chair for that committee at this time. So it's definitely something that's important to me to ensure that we are a welcoming community at school and in the city. There's definitely some places we can excel in our schools and do better. Like Martha was talking about, it's not always just, you know, sex, race, religion, but there's other things, you know, disabilities and such. So I'm looking forward to what the equity audit brings forward and really being able to give a different perspective than maybe some of our other school board members are able to provide. I did go to school in this area for a little while, so I've learned some things, and I work with the schools now in multiple different facets. So I think I can bring a different perspective at this for this situation.
Great, thank you. Jenica, how will you support those efforts?
So I think it's great that diversity has taken on a larger part of the district and the board's agenda. We have the committee, we have plaques going up in schools. Overall, I think the schools are welcoming towards students, and I've always thought that the teachers and staff are incredibly just, welcoming and appreciate the students for who they are. I know, like in our high school, the student council is really involved and advocating for more diversity efforts, which is great to see that coming from the students. And like Renee and Martha, I look forward to the results of the equity audit that we'll hear hopefully next month.
Thank you, Jenica. And Mary, can you comment on that as well, on your thoughts on diversity, equity, and supporting that in the schools? Oh, you're muted, Mary. I think you have to hit *6 on your phone. Okay, no, I'm not sure if we've lost Mary, but she's still muted, so we'll go to the next question. Prior to the pandemic, there were many people were already leaving the field of school administration, teaching, and the support staff. However, since the pandemic, the number of individuals who have left the education field has increased tremendously. As a school board member, how would you support the school district employees, and what would you do towards retention of what our current employees are? Renee, why don't you take this one first?
Thank you. I would love to see some additional self-care options for our teachers. Obviously, we know teachers are overworked. We know that there's this ideology that they're underpaid. While I haven't looked at that aspect of things, I know they're overworked, and the pandemic definitely did not help. At this point, it would be great to see us offering different incentives for, when they're at work, if it's getting a massage donated or something that just kind of keeps people engaged. It's a lot of work to work with children. I also think that it would be great to be in the community a little bit more, to engage community members to want to do some substitute teaching. We need to be able to give our teachers a break, and unfortunately, a lot of people aren't coming forward, and it could be because they don't understand what that entails. It could be a lot of things, but being able to get out and provide education to the community, hopefully engage some more substitute teachers, substitute nurses to come into the school, and then offering some of those extracurricular things to really kind of give the teachers a break when they need it, and not being required so much of their time and energy from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., if not longer.
Okay, thank you. Jenica, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic has obviously been very challenging for teachers, for administrators, for staff in school overall. I mean, school nurses, paras, like everyone. So it makes sense that people are tired. I think we can continue just to engage really positively with the teachers and the staff. We just finished negotiating a new 3-year contract with the teachers that's going up. What Renee said about like bringing in more subs and volunteers, I think as we move sort of past the COVID emergency, bringing parents in to help out with things around the school. Like I taught 4 winds for one of my kids' classrooms, and it's like an hour in front of the class, and the teacher can be doing something else maybe, right? So just opportunities like that to sort of get back to normal and have, I think, teachers maybe a little bit more wiggle room in their schedules due to volunteers would really help.
Excellent, thank you. Martha?
Well, I agree with everything that Renee and Jenica has said. I think that with the pandemic, everybody is tired. And I think that in teaching, it's been exacerbated because we haven't been able to welcome the volunteers into our schools that do help the teachers and maybe give them a break, whether it's reading to the children, giving extra assistance to certain children. And I think that as we transition into a post-pandemic and back to more of a traditional educational model, it's going to be really important that we do step up and recruit, the parents back to the schools, invite them, making it welcoming, and also increase and make sure that our staff is aware of the wellness opportunities that are available to them through their benefit plans. And to also make sure that we have an adequate substitute teaching pool to the best that we can.
Very good. Thank you. And Mary, are you still with us? Would you like to comment? Okay, I think we're trying to be inclusive as well, but I think technology is making it difficult for us right now. So let's talk about priorities. If elected or re-elected, as the case may be, what are the top 3 priorities that you'd hope to accomplish in your tenure as a school board member? Jenica, let's begin with you.
I think my first priority is just getting back to normal and having the schools be a more sort of relaxed place where people can see each other's faces if they wish, right? I think the renovation plans, again, we've tried for the last few years to have these passed by the voters. We've really worked hard to think of new opportunities to reduce the amount. So seeing that through and is very also encouraging that we can fund the Mount Leb projects without going to the voters. And I think the third one is just keeping the curriculum strong for all of our students. I do think we do a great job with special ed in the district. And just making sure our students, as Renee said, like, kids learn in different ways, finding the best way that kids learn and meeting their needs and helping them achieve.
Thank you very much, Jenica. Renee?
Thank you. So I guess one of my goals is obviously getting back to some normalcy. I would love to see that. And I'd love to send my kid off to school without his mask on his little face and see his little friends. I'd like to be able to support our community in meeting their needs without significantly negatively impacting their financial status at this time. And then I would really love to just be an advocate for the kids. I said that kind of in my opening statement, is ensuring that their voices are heard and their needs are met, and it's not just focused on us as the adults and what we need.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Martha?
I think learning to coexist with COVID and making sure that we update all of our protocols. And as one of our commenters at a board meeting suggested, it's going to be a little bit tricky navigating for a while as we learn to coexist with COVID for our school nurses and when a student cannot attend school and what that means. So I think that that's a #1 priority, is defining that and making sure that our children have access to education with as missed days of school little as possible. I also think that our renovation and our facility needs is an important goal, as well as monitoring all of the new housing developments that are coming online to make sure that it is not impacting the size of our classes, especially in the elementary schools. And then I think continuing to enhance our curriculum and focusing on making sure that we're continuing to provide a quality education and making Lebanon an education destination of choice for people that are looking to buy houses in the area.
Okay, thank you, Martha. And I'd like to remind anyone listening that if you'd like to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function. It's located likely on the top of your screen. And if you do that, I can call on you and have you unmute and ask your question. Now, Renee, you had mentioned about being an advocate for the kids. Would you like to go into a little bit more detail? What issues do you think need to be raised, and tell us a bit about your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I think as a parent, we all hear our kids talk about issues that are happening in the schools and or in their classrooms. And while I can advocate to my own child's teacher, I also hear his friends talking and their friends talking, and somebody needs to be able to say in school board meetings, there's this group of kids that are, online really bullying. How can we bring more education into our schools? What can we do to positively make change for the issues that are at hand? So I know that as adults, we know these things are there, but we've also seen such an increase in the youth suicide rates. We've seen an increase in depression and self-injury. We've seen an increase in mental health issues, especially in the pandemic. And these are all things that I see on a daily basis through my job. So I want to be able to advocate for some of the needs that maybe are being missed because they're just not talked about as openly in school as they are maybe online chat rooms or texting with friends. So things that maybe just aren't on the spotlight, but really do need to be.
Okay, thank you. And I see we do have a couple questions. KLH, would you like to unmute and ask your question, please?
Hi, yeah, it's Karen Leo Hill. Thank you to the candidates for running. I think one of the things that became really clear over COVID was the importance of technology and remote learning and the ability to use some of the technology resources that we have. Can you talk about moving forward what the role of remote learning is in Lebanon schools?
Oh, that's an interesting question,
And
Martha.
for example, just to underscore, like what happens, we are going to have COVID around for a bit longer, and if masks are optional, we may have more COVID. So when kids are out of school for COVID, is the Lebanon School District going to make provisions to make sure that those kids can still be educated?
Great. Martha, would you go ahead and take that?
I think that's a great question, and certainly a policy that we are going to have to start to think about as we kind of look at our experiences over the past 2 years with COVID. We know from when we were in the hybrid model that model was not sustainable for our students or teachers. And the synchronous learning, there was a lot of issues with that as well. But I think that we have a lot of experience with that now, and we should be definitely delving into that and trying to find ways to make it better for our students and for our staff. And because I definitely agree that there may be times that we're going to have students that are going to be missing 5-10 days of school because they're on a quarantine for COVID. And it would be great if they didn't have to just do that all offline. They could still participate with their classmates in class and be able to at least connect with their teachers online for a portion of the class to feel connected still to the school. But I think that our task over the summer and into the next year is to really delve into the experience that we've had and see how we can improve upon it and make it better. Because it was a great tool, but there is also a lot of issues with it. And I can tell you just from even observing my own child's class, the teachers were saints because there were more remote dial-in problems or connecting, and kids didn't know which room they were supposed to be in when they did breakout rooms, and the teachers had patience and saints. I was listening as I was working from home, and I just don't know how they did it.
Well, it was certainly hard for some of us adults as well. So, Jenica, what are your thoughts on technology and going forward?
Yeah, I think we sort of globally, or at least as a country, learned that remote learning is no substitute for in-person school, certainly. Of course, the district does have an obligation and a desire to educate all of its children, no matter where they are. So with kids are on quarantine, we do need to, I think more deeply about that, especially going into the fall and the winter. And I think it also varies by age group, right? So elementary kids tend to not do that great learning on a computer, at least not in my experience. High school kids probably do a lot better. And that could be a more easy transition at that stage than at the elementary school stage. So I think we should look at this in terms of the grades and the age of the students and find a plan that kind of works for those sort of chunks of ages.
And Renee, what are your thoughts?
I agree with Jenica. I mean, the littles had a really hard time, and it was really a lot of parents kind of doing the work. So, for me, for instance, I was full-time job and a full-time para because I was helping my kid get into school and whatnot. We also know that there's a lot of kids that just can't learn remotely. So I challenge us to kind of look at how did we manage things before when kids were out sick, right? Whether it was paper or whatnot. But I think that there's a twofold approach there that we need to be looking at. It is difficult to have 3 kids on Zoom and 12 kids in the classroom. That is just a difficult thing to manage. So just being able to be being able to kind of choose wisely how we manage this and being able to set a couple of different options in place is going to be important.
Great, thank you. Phil Bush, I see that you have a question. Please unmute.
Hi, thanks for coming to this for all the candidates. I'm interested in the proposal. There was a proposal to add a social worker position, I think, to the school staff, and also there's the issue of the school resource officer. As you all know, I'm sure there's another advisory ballot item on that. I'd like to know each of your positions on both the social worker and the school resource officer. Thanks.
Okay, Jenica, why don't you start with that?
Sure. We had a lot of discussion about the school resource officer last spring. In the end, I voted to keep this position because we did not see in the data that the students were treated any differently based on any inherent characteristics, and that the school resource officer has nothing to do with disciplining of the students. A lot of it is outside the school or dealing with adults who might come onto the school grounds. Regarding the social worker, I expressed skepticism in a meeting that a position in the administrative building is maybe meeting the best needs of the kids who would need that help. But the administration said it was a priority, and so that's great. They put out a position for it. They're going to hire a social worker, and I look forward to hearing from this person on how their job is going next year.
Okay, Renee?
I'm in full support of keeping the SRO. I went through this last year in these conversations. I work closely in my current job with the SRO, and as someone who runs the juvenile court diversion programs for the county, I can tell you we've had 0 referrals from him. So he's not dealing with the behavioral, disciplinary action aspect, but more so he's kind of a social worker in himself and out there meeting the kids on a daily basis and understanding some issues that they're going through and providing some guidance. And I think that that's an important piece, especially given the world that we're in right now that's so against men in uniform or women in uniform, and being able to humanize the badge a little bit, which has been really helpful. In terms of the social work position, a part of me feels like it's a duplication of services. We're already paying for guidance counselors in the school, and now we're going to be paying social workers who essentially are doing the same thing. I believe there's a misconception between social workers and mental health counselors, in that social workers spend a lot of time connecting services where and ensuring that individuals have the right resources, where a mental health worker is someone who's really spending time focusing on the needs, the mental health needs of the kiddos. So a social worker and a guidance counselor essentially do a lot of the exact same work. So we are now duplicating that service by hiring a social worker within the school and already having guidance counselors.
Okay, and Martha?
Yeah, I agree with Jenica. We definitely delved deeply into this and did our due diligence on the SRO position last year. I voted in favor of keeping the SRO position because, like Jenica said, the data did not support the position that the SRO was being harmful to our students. And they also, are not responsible for the discipline of our students. It was strictly for criminal activity. And I also believe that, an SRO can provide continuity to the students. And if a student is put into a diversion program, they can serve as a resource on the laws and how to abide by the laws that a social worker cannot, because that is not in the skill set of a social worker. That said, I also do promote, I am in agreement of having a district-wide social worker. I do think that we do have a lot of students that come from underserved families that need to be put with access to the resources that are available for them in the community to help them thrive at home and in the school system. And I think having a district-wide will really help consolidate, and it will be able to push some of those resources down to the guidance counselors who can have their discussions. I don't necessarily see the guidance counselor also functioning as a social worker. I think they have a lot of other duties as well. So this is going to be someone at the district level that really is taking a holistic view of all of the needs of the service of the students and being able to connect them at the appropriate time, and being a resource for the SRO officer, the district administrators, the building administrators, as well as for the guidance counselors.
Thank you, Martha. Cappy, I see that you have a question. Please unmute and ask your question.
I had a quick comment about the technology issue. I was very surprised to learn from one of the special ed teachers that some of their students thrived through remote learning. They weren't being bullied, for one thing, and so I think it's just important to keep in mind that all of you are in favor of alternative kinds of learning, which I support, and maybe remote learning for some people has that ability to use too, so to not be too prejudiced against it. That was all.
Okay, thank you for that comment, Kathy. Well, we're just about at the time where we should start wrapping up. So, Renee, I'm going to ask you to do your 1-minute wrap up, please.
Of course. Thank you. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. I do look forward to serving on the school board. I think that even if I don't get elected, I will run again and again and again, because I know that I bring value and will be able to really support your kiddos and our community as a whole. I want to be able to advocate for our kids. I want to be able to advocate for our elderly and disabled population that are affected largely by our decisions. I think that given my background and where I come from and part of the diversity and inclusion aspect of everything, that I will make a great candidate for you all and make decisions that promote health and well-being for our kids and a positive academic future.
Thank you very much, Renee. Jenica.
Well, thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Upper Valley Business Alliance for hosting this. I believe that in Lebanon, we're really fortunate to have such strong schools that are filled with people who care about our children and who work hard to help them succeed. I know my kids have thrived in school, and I've benefited from the dedication of the teachers and their staff. I'm excited to get our schools back to normal and also to hopefully embark on the much needed renovations at the Hanover Street School and the high school. So thank you for everyone who came out to watch this forum, and thank you for voting on Tuesday.
Thank you, Jenica. And Martha.
Sure. I can honestly say that I've enjoyed serving as a board member for the past 3 years. While I never could have anticipated the time-consuming pandemic discussions and tough decisions that we would be called upon to make as a board during my term, I am deeply appreciative of the civility of my colleagues as well as the entire Lebanon community as we debated unprecedented issues that oftentimes had no clear answers. As we transition out of the pandemic, I look forward to building upon the foundation that has been laid for the student-centered culture and the work that is ahead of us to address the academic, social, and emotional needs of our learners with the goal to help all our students thrive post-pandemic, as well as to make Lebanon a top educational choice for future residents. I have gained extensive knowledge of the district these past 3 years, which will serve to make me a highly effective board member for the next 3 years. Thank you, and I look forward to your vote on Tuesday.
Thank you, Martha. And I want to remind our listeners that we do have a fourth candidate, Mary Eads, who's having some technical issues, and she was able to tell us her opinion on one topic, but was cutting out a bit. So just to make sure that everyone knows that she also is running for school board. So that will conclude our candidates night. Just to remind you again, Monday, March 7th is the last day for the absentee ballots to be returned in person to City Hall. Tuesday, March 8th is the election day. The polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that is for Ward 1 at Kilton Public Library, Ward 2, United Methodist Church on School Street, and Ward 3, the City Council Chambers. Thank you to our candidates for City Council and also for the Lebanon School Board. Thank you for all that you do and your willingness to run, because let's face it, public office is not an easy job, particularly in these times. And to have people such as yourselves willing to run is really terrific for our community. So thank you and good luck with your elections. And this should be available for viewing later on the City of Lebanon website and also on Community Access Television. So good luck to everybody in your elections. Good night.